I play the record player.
Well, you know, Bill, I came from a very musical family. Have I told you this before?
No. And if you had, I wouldn't admit
Very
it.
musical family. My mother, well, we had a little orchestra when I was growing up. I played the violin, Frank played the cello, my brother Fred played the flute, and Margaret played the piano.
Oh.
And we had a little instrumental group going,
Really?
and we used to go around and play for different occasions.
We have it on record someplace. Do you know what?
Do we really?
There is a record somewhere.
Oh,
I
really?
almost hesitate
But
to.
anyway, Bill, my mother especially was musical. And one day when I was a young lad down on the farm, we had a tremendous flood. And I floated down the river on the chicken house, and my mother accompanied me on the piano.
He's awful. Just terrible. And I'm pleased to say that I'm the one serious Asbury, and I do not participate in this kind. Mostly because I can't remember.
Oh, dear. I took voice lessons one time, and my voice teacher told me to open the window and throw out my chest. And
That could be painful.
after I got out of the hospital, I got myself a new voice teacher. Oh dear.
One after another.
When did you
It's too
three
much.
first get together? What early memories do you have of, picnics?
Well, we were
family
talking about one in
reunions?
the mid-1930s back on the farm at
I remember it
Aldershot.
vividly. I do remember
But
it.
I remember that too, and I have photographs of it. But
And
then Bill's path and mine were at cross purposes during the war and after the war.
although we were doing similar things.
Yeah, and I
Well,
know
what
that
were you doing that was similar?
Well, we were both in the
in
V12
school,
program.
both in school.
Oh,
You went to Montana, did you?
Went
For
to
your V12?
Montana for second year of college and then to medical school in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember that you came back and spent some time at the University of Washington.
I did.
And I think you called on my mother and dad at that time.
I did
you
at
not?
that time, and I remember.
I know they had seen you, but I had not for, gosh, it could be 25 years.
Where were you back during the late 40s?
Well, I was finishing medical school in
I-
'48, and
I
I
see.
interned in Seattle in 1949, and then
I
went
see.
came to Bremerton in 1950, and went back to Portland for another 4 years.
I see. Well, I remember visiting your mother and father, and your father, Emery, had this magnificent voice. He just, a big,
Great voice.
booming voice.
Yeah.
And I had just written a whimsical piece for the Columns, which you may remember was the humor magazine, allegedly.
University of Washington.
University, right.
And I've always been in awe of Emery. He always kind of terrified me. He did. He was a big man. He was a very bright man. He was, and my father had such respect for
Sure.
him as well.
They were very close.
And he, after we talked for a while, I had supper with him. And he said, "Billy," he said, "I just read your effusion in the Columns."
Oh, really?
Effusion? And I'd never heard that word before,
Oh,
even
that's
though
good.
I was a journalism
Is it
student.
a good word?
And yeah, it was a fine word. It just means to effuse, just to give off nothing.
Just go on and on.
Yeah, prattle.
Your mouth's open, but nothing's coming
That's
out.
the idea.
The lights are on, but nobody's home.
And I remember, and he meant it as a kindly and a generous thing, but it scared me to death.
So you went home and looked it up in the
I
dictionary?
did. I went home and looked it up and said, "Okay, I'll accept that." He was a great man. He really was.
My father and your father,
Our father,
I
who art in
sincerely
heaven.
hope, I sincerely hope so.
Our Father who art
I
in
hope
heaven.
so. But he had the ability, as a public speaker, to make himself heard in every corner of the room, no matter how large the room, without the aid of a
Yeah,
microphone
he
or
could.
amplified sound.
Had a big voice.
And he could really project. He knew how to do it. And I think he got that from his father, who was a lay preacher
Mm-hmm.
and who used to also cry auctions,
Mhm.
and
But he was always in demand for funerals and weddings and whatever needed a pronouncement why Alex was there.
well, I've seen Dad speak to 600 or 700 people in an audience, and he'd always project to the very last row and people could hear him and could understand him. And he didn't have to speak into a microphone or boom out or raise his voice unnecessarily. He had a certain quality that carried, the quality of the voice carried. And I've always admired that.
Your father was then principal for a time of the Galt.
Franklin B. Galt Junior High School in Tacoma.
Yes.
15 years he was. He had a job from 1928 until 1943 when he retired.
I had occasion once when I was still in the newspaper business to meet the then governor of our state, Dixie Lee Ray.
Oh yeah.
Are you aware that she was an alumna of the Galt Junior High School?
No, I didn't know that.
And
Didn't
she
know that.
was there at the time that your father was principal.
I didn't know that.
And remembered him with great respect.
That's news to me,
Yeah.
Bill. I didn't know that.
Yep.
I always remember what they said about Governor Ray, though. She never wore a brassiere. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No.
She wore Dixie cups.
I don't think I know what a Dixie cup is.
Anyhow, I knew Dixie Lee Ray
Yeah.
very well because from Galt she went to Stadium High School, and I knew her slightly there. When I got to the university,
Are you a graduate of Stadium?
Stadium.
oh yes, 1931. I think she finished about 1930, if I'm not mistaken. But from there she went to the university, and she was in science and chemistry, and she was a teacher's assistant
Uh-huh.
in freshman chemistry. And I
Really?
took chemistry, and she was grading my papers, and she always gave me a low grade somehow because I didn't do very well. But I
You
remember
didn't tell her
Dixie.
that you were the son of Emory
No,
Asbury.
I didn't
You'd have
dare.
had
I
it
could
made.
hardly even talk to her at that time.
Yeah. Well, it's still true. Yeah, your dad was, before he became principal at Galt, he taught.
He taught at Lincoln and at Stadium with your dad.
He
Yeah,
taught
my dad taught
civics-
at Lincoln and my mother taught at Stadium.
civics and U.S. history, and your father taught journalism
That's right.
and what else?
Spanish.
Spanish.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, those were his two subjects. So we've had education in the family,
I
in
should
our
say.
respective families. And you taught for many years and then became a principal yourself.
I was in the classroom for about 21 years, and I was in administration for about 10 years. So
And then married your childhood sweetheart.
married my childhood sweetheart, and I married, my first wife was a teacher, and my present wife, I call her my present wife to keep her on her toes. My present wife was a teacher too.
Uh-huh.
And your next wife will probably be a teacher.
If I ever get married again, so help me, it'll probably be a teacher, yeah.
What subject would any of you ladies like to address to the panel?
Well, I was wondering, since Charles is the eldest, what he thought of you two. Was there enough age difference that you didn't have the same friends or weren't interested in what? Because you're just a few months apart, aren't you?
Yeah.
Oh, no, well, yeah, we're a couple of years
A couple-
apart.
year and a half or something
year
like
and a
that.
half, yeah.
Well, I
Chuck
have,
was
What are-
always, he was
first of all-
always the older guy.
What are your ages right now? Confess your ages for the camera.
I am, next January, I'll be 79.
And next December, I'll be 67.
And next April, I'll be 69.
60. So I'm 10 years, a little bit. more
Yeah, and
than
about
you.
12 years older than me.
I remember very distinctly when Pal was down at Edgewood on the farm, you know, and I used to slop the pigs, you know, every morning and night, and I was out feeding the pigs, and Pal was looking over the fence. He said, "Boy," he said, I sure understand why they call them pigs, you know. And I thought that was kind of clever.
Well, it sounds
Which
like the
came
kind
first?
of profound statement that my brother gave.
Well, that's the true story. We laughed about that.
Oh, no.
It's a good story. I hadn't heard that. You know, my father, and I think it's true of yours from what you just said, my dad never got over being a farmer.
No.
That really
Never.
was what he loved to the end of his life.
I know.
And your dad,
The same with Dad, yeah.
Your father and our father
Yeah,
had farm blood in their veins.
Absolutely.
And they couldn't get away from it.
yeah.
And constantly, I don't know about your father, but my father was constantly in debt.
Yeah.
Trying to buy enough stuff to keep the farm going, you
Yep.
know? And, boy, I tell you, it was touch and go. And we used to charge our groceries and then wonder how we were going to pay for those groceries at the end of the month. You didn't know about that.
I've been in that situation myself. Not then, but more recently. When I first finished medical school and internship and came back after residency, we were rather to practice and live in Bremerton. That was in 1954. Why, we were heavily in debt and had no assets. My brother-in-law, Ellen's brother-in-law, had been kind enough to give me his automobile, and that was about the only asset I had. I still owed him for it. And we used to get our groceries and charge them and hope that we could pay for them at the end of the month. It really went on that way.
Well, let me tell you about Janet and me. When we got married, I was working for the American Bible Society. A good Democrat that I am, I've always tried to do my part
I
in
certainly hope
civilization.
so. I certainly hope so.
And but we were so poor that to get through the first month of our marriage, I had to hawk my watch and Janet's engagement ring.
That's because we were living in New York City
True
trying to
story.
maintain
True
two
story.
Cadillacs.
True story.
True story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were trying to maintain two Cadillacs in New York City where you had to remember to move the cars every night because they swept one side of the street or the
Oh,
other.
yeah.
And if you didn't, it was like a $50 tag to get
Janet,
your
you
car
ruined
out.
my poverty story by saying we had two Cadillacs.
Well, they were old Cadillacs.
They were awfully old.
We were poor.
Yeah, we were
Well,
poor.
that's great.
We were poor.
Trouble is, I still am.
Well, now you renewed your acquaintance then when Bill came up here
When
to
Bill
be the
came
editor
here,
of the Bremerton
when
Sun.
was
Yeah,
that?
and you learned about it. I'd lost track, but I arrived here in Bremerton in 1966.
66. Well, Jack McHenry told me that he just hired my cousin.
That's right. And I remembered generally that you were here, but somehow
Somehow,
it didn't
yeah.
become a focal point until you gave me a phone call.
Yeah, well, we hadn't laid eyes on each other
That's
for about
right.
25 years.
And so I came up here, and you, I think my very first day here, you invited me over to
Sure,
dinner, and
you bet.
I haven't left.
Well, that's great. That's some time ago now, Bill.
That was 66, for heaven's sakes, that's 26 years
Yeah,
ago
that's
that I
right.
came back.
Yeah.
And then I saw you, Charles, again. I think for the first time, you arranged a family reunion at some park over near where you live. There was a lake there. What was the name of
Lake
it?
Sammamish.
It was
Oh.
Cottage
Cottage Grove.
That's right.
Lake,
Cottage Lake.
Norm's Resort on Cottage Lake
That's
near
right.
Woodinville.
That's right. And you put together that deal and had kith and kin from all
Yeah,
over
that was a big reunion that time.
Yeah, that was a lot of
Well,
fun.
I think that we shouldn't completely get away from the family reunion idea. If we
I
have
think so.
any way to do it, I think we should try to do it somehow. And
It's about my turn, I think.
we've
I'm
had
not
it a couple
sure.
of times at our house, and we'd like to see it keep going.
Sure.
Well, it's not easy. You know, we all have not only our own children now.
The busy lives, that's right, that's right.
And these children have their own lives, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult to get them all together. I realize this, but it's worth a
some
try.
of our kids, well, I think all of them really, they really have cherished those reunions.
Yeah,
They-
yeah, it means
The
a lot to
sense
them.
of family
Yep.
is important to
Yeah,
them.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, and it gives, it's one thing that I think our country hungers for is that we've all become nomads and impersonal, and we're glued to our televisions, and those things are.
That's where we're expected to learn about family values.
That's
Yeah,
right.
family
Yeah.
values. Oh, well.
Murphy
Those
Brown.
words
Murphy
used
Brown.
a lot lately. Family values.
Dan
That's
Quayle.
all it-
Dan Quayle.
Yeah.
Family values.
Somebody asked Mr. Quayle what he thought about Roe versus Wade, and he said he thought those were alternate ways to cross the Delaware.
Oh, no. Roe versus Wade.
Janet, are you making, we don't have to make notes.
But anybody who can put an E on the end of potato can't be all bad.
That's exactly right, and I think that's the high point of his career.
You know why they don't have dogs in the White House, don't you?
Why is that, Charles?
Everybody knows that dogs chase quail and pee on bushes. That's what I understand.
One after another.
There's no time.
after another. I think we're going to put this on for the funniest
Well,
video.
oh, video.
Charles and
Mr.
Frank, one after another.
Mr. Quayle is reported to have said he's awfully grateful that he studied Latin in college because he was going to make a trip to Latin America.
Oh,
Right.
Oh.
He said it with a straight face, too.
I just can't help admiring the guy, though. You know, in some ways.
Well, he's hard to he's hard to discourage.
I admire his tenacity.
Tenacity is the word.
Yeah, the other day he told a joke on himself. He said, you know, my opponent said of me, when I accused him of being a liberal, he said, well, Dan Quayle doesn't know how to spell the word liberal. And Quayle said, I know how to spell the word liberal. It is spelled C-L-I-N-T-O-N-E. Anyway, obviously we've got an election coming up, and
We're talking about our intrepid vice president, who is a
who's from Indiana.
bright young man from Indiana.
That's
He's
the
from
one
Terre
thing in
No,
his
he's not from
favor.
Terre Haute.
In his favor, he's from Indiana.
Indianapolis.
Don't forget that.
Yeah.
I have not forgotten it for a minute. And he said had a nice few words to say about Larry Bird, who just retired too, also from Indiana.
Did he? Yeah. Hard not to say something
Yeah.
nice about Larry Bird.
Quite an athlete.
In spite of your political diversity, you never have been at one another's throats that I remember over
That's all that you know.
That's right.
Well, now, there was one 4th of July at Long Beach.
Yeah, right.
When Fred was alive, and Bill and Fred were at it.
Really?
Oh,
Right.
yeah, I remember
Something
Is that
political,
right?
was it? Some political argument?
It
It
must
was a
be.
political argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't.
Well, I think that we have to be the luckiest guys in the world, though. When you
True.
look at these lovely
Lovely ladies we have
that
right
we
here.
married.
That's
I should
right.
say.
And the wonderful accomplishments. Janet is an author and writes plays, and Eva's a musician and plays the organ in different churches, and Ellen is a beautiful housekeeper and does keeps the whole family
Not
together.
to mention a superb nurse and mother.
And takes good care of her husband.
Right.
there.
Takes good care of you, and that is a job.
Did you understand?
It's a chore.
Anybody that can take care of you deserves a lot of credit.
You got that right, brother. Well, I've had about all of this interview I can take.
Well, me too. I think what we'll do is
Well, I think you all need to apologize to Pal, because he's the first one who's going to receive this, and you haven't been kind to Uncle Pal, who
Pal.
thought pigs were well named.
Now, we hear that your health has not been the best lately, but
But it's improving.
We're glad to hear that you're on the rapid mend and that you'll be fit as a fiddle soon. We hope that for you.
You bet.
Indeed we do, and we're planning now, and we can't make our plans without you. I have proof that I have just shown to my esteemed cousins that not only are there fish in Alaska, but even I can catch them. And so we're planning an outing to Alaska this coming summer to catch king salmon. 30 pounds goes back in the water. Anything above 30 pounds we may keep. Halibut, and also
Humpies.
Humpies.
We're going to get a humpy is a pink salmon.
Nobody keeps a
Nobody keeps a humpy except Charles. But anyway, we're planning on this, and you got to be there, man. All right.
Yeah, we're
Why
counting
don't
on
we
you.
do? Why don't we do that? I'm
That's the deal.
interested in that, really.
Yeah, and it's an easy trek up there, and the fish are available. Janet, you want to turn that machine off, or do you know how?
Well, you can get up and turn that machine
Turn it off. Okay, but then it looks so gross when I have to get up and do everything. I mean,
That was
Yeah.
Emery's father that told you.
yeah.
His father is Colonel.
Yeah.
Would you go over that again about our grandfather and the fact that he got into the Indiana unit in the Civil War at a young age?
Alexander Perry Asbury was my grandfather, paternal grandfather, and he enlisted in the Army on the Union side when he was very young, before the age of 18. And a story was told, which was related to me by my own father, that he took a piece of chalk and wrote on the bottom of his shoes 18, the number 18, so that he could truthfully say afterwards that he enlisted when he was over 18, and without telling a lie. And that is the way it came to me from my own father.
I hadn't heard that story, Charles, but what I did hear from my father was that AP served in a unit in the Civil War on the Union side, obviously, an Indiana unit, that in turn was under the command of Sherman. Was that what you heard as well?
No.
He didn't go to the sea with him,
No,
but he was with Sherman in Atlanta.
He was.
Yes.
And that our grandfather, AP being my grandfather, paternal grandfather as well, was on a troop train. He was in the process of being mustered out. The war was over, and he was on a troop train nearing Washington, D.C. when the word was passed to all of these soldiers on the train that Lincoln had been killed. And that AP was so outraged at the fact that Lincoln had been killed by firearms that he said he threw his musket out the window of the train.
well,
In the thought that he never ever wanted to hold a weapon that was designed to kill man.
well, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
Had you heard that, Frank?
Yes.
Yeah. Now maybe I shared it with you, but maybe have you got confirmation on that?
No, I don't have that here.
I've got the tape on again.
But what I have, okay.
I
you
just
don't
wanted
need
to
the tape, I just wanted
put
to show
this
what I had.
in front of the camera to show what a handsome man Alexander Perry Asbury was. Was he not the
Very
commander of the Grand Army of the Republic?
For the state of Indiana.
For the state of Indiana.
State commander, in fact.
I see the family resemblance.
Well, I
All
do
of
too. He looks like Emery. He looks like my dad.
Well, I have exactly now some dates for you. He was born December 1st of 1846.
Ah,
He enlisted in the Army on the 10th day of February, 1864, which was 9 or 10 months before his 18th birthday.
Right.
I see. So that would give credence to
Credence
Charles'
to
story.
Charles' story,
Well,
yeah.
it came to me as a true story, and I think it came from my father or one of his brothers. I don't know whether Uncle Ben, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I hadn't heard it from Dad, but it's entirely possible. My memory is not as sharp and crisp as it once was.
You know, they say that children take after their grandparents, you know?
There it is. Handsome dude.
St. Charles, I think an interesting story is when your father went to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and he was in the embassy.
That's next year, we'll tell about that.
Oh,
That's
tell this year.
That's a very interesting story.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yes,
Why are
it
you
is.
holding
It's
back?
a tremendous story.
I don't know exactly what you have reference to, but
When he was sent to, on that train to Halifax, after the explosion.
The story goes that
You better
Maybe I
come over
better
and
get
Come on
on
over
camera.
here
Yeah.
and be on camera,
I
cousin.
think that's a tremendous story.
he had been first as American consul in Port Antonio, Jamaica.
right.
He had come back to Washington, D.C. My mother had been ill and had to have an operation for a thyroidectomy and also had an appendectomy. She was very ill all at the same time, but survived it.
Not only that, she was,
And
my
Dad,
brother Fred was born in 1918.
19.
19 was it?
Yeah.
No, 18.
19.
All right.
Anyway,
I stand corrected.
my point is that they were back in Washington, D.C., and Dad was looking for other jobs
Right.
in the consular department, and all he could get were things like in Costa Rica or Guatemala or some of these terrible places in Central America, where his good friends told him nobody had the temerity to take his wife and family. They were just too bad places. So he would turn them down one after the other. And then in December 1917, just before Christmas, a munition ship blew up in the harbor of Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Right.
And shattered every window in town. It was bitter cold. There was a lot of damage. Awful
Killed
lot of
between
damage.
800 and 900 people.
A lot of people died, and my father was rushed off by himself on the train to Halifax, Nova Scotia to help the consul general up there who had his hands full. And so he stayed there for, I don't know how long a period of time, but it was longer than he had intended to or longer than he wanted to, and he was separated from his wife and his children and his mother-in-law who were staying behind in Washington, D.C. And during that same trip, he spent some time in Montreal. He got the flu. He almost died. They put him in a ward of the people that were not expected to recover, and he recovered. And eventually, when he did get back to Washington, a nice job came for him to go to England.
Yeah.
So it was in 1919 or 1920 then that he actually went to England to become the American consul at Stoke-on-Trent and later on at Cardiff.
And my father was his assistant at Cardiff.
I never knew that.
Yes,
Never knew that.
yes.
I never knew your dad was there.
Yes, he was appointed as your father's vice constable.
My
Really?
goodness.
Uh-huh.
How interesting.
I
I
know
know
he
that
was-
sometime after that, your dad returned to Tacoma and was teaching school there.
Yes. I'm not sure that my father ever took the post there, but he was appointed
Oh.
to be your father's deputy.
I see. That's very interesting. I
And,
never knew that.
and the further detail of that, I don't know.
Well, this munition ship that blew up in Halifax Harbor in 1917 was one of the most horrendous explosions ever in this country, and it killed more lives. The thing is that people heard the blast and rushed to the windows, and then the concussion blast came after that, and the windows came in on them and blinded many of these people. And the day following the explosion was a tremendous blizzard, and the temperatures went way down below zero. And a train was sent from Boston in the next few days, filled with blankets, medical supplies, nurses, doctors, and so on and so forth, to take care of the people who were still up there. No hospitals available. Most of the homes and buildings around the harbor were leveled, absolutely leveled. And my father was sent up to help distribute the relief supplies.
Really?
And he stayed there for a while, as Frank said, but I don't
Right.
know exactly how long.
The only explosion larger than that explosion was the atomic energy.
Was the atomic
Yeah,
bomb in
that's
Hiroshima.
probably
It was
true.
the largest
Really?
explosion that ever had occurred.
This is going to need some editing, but I've just brought up some papers that I got from the National Archives in Washington, D.C. some years ago with my grandfather's military record and the date of his enlistment and the application of his mother for a widow's pension in 1927, signed with an X and verified by Uncle, because she couldn't read or
Sarah.
write.
Sarah Asbury, her mark.
Her mark, and here's an X, and here's an X, and it's attested by two persons who can write, and one of them is our Uncle Doc, our Uncle Arthur, and the other is Gertie Asbury. I don't know who that is. But anyway, by a special act of March 4th, 1927, she was allowed a dependent mother's pension because she was one of the few remaining mothers of a Civil War veteran. And she was over 100 years old. She was 101 years old at that time.
That's Aunt Sally.
Aunt Sally.
Well,
But
there's
these are
some longevity in that family.
Where'd you get
Yeah.
these papers?
from the National Archives.
Oh, all right.
These are copies of the letter from the National Archives in Washington.
Are they,
Alexander P. Asbury, Department of the Interior, Bureau of Pensions.
can they be duplicated?
Sure.
Photocopy.
Yeah,
Evelina,
I would
Maud,
love to
Ida,
have a
George,
set of
Greta,
these.
Bertha, Arthur, Sarah, Charles Emery, J. Lester, and Raymond.
Wow.
Listing all the kids and their birthdays.
Ray
Elmira Bitter.
is the one that was killed on,
But anyway,
thrown from a horse.
you might like to look those over. I think it was interesting papers. And
Oh, yeah.
those are some of the application papers. I need to study them myself. And
He
find out
was in
exactly
the
what-
85th Indiana Volunteers,
Yes,
Infantry.
Company H.
Company H, 85th Indiana. Oh, I would love to get
85th
copies. of
Indiana
these.
volunteer. I'll make some and
Will
send
you
them
do
to you
that?
guys. Yeah,
I
sure.
don't want to take them.
Sure, I'll have copies made.
Did you
send
see
them right
this,
along.
Eva?
No, I didn't.
That's a copy of Alexander
Well, thank you, Frank.
Perry Asbury,
He was a handsome
That's
dude, don't you think so?
my father's father.
What are you doing lurking in the shadows?
Here,
Oh, I can hear real
Oh,
well.
okay.
You've seen this.
Well, you wouldn't be on camera, it's focused on the couch.
And
so-
our grandfather died in Idaho.
He did. He was visiting Aunt Eva at Eagle, Idaho.
Eagle,
And there is some
Idaho.
resemblance. isn't
And he
there?
died in, I think it was 1920. His wife died in 1919 when my father was still overseas.
One of the things that
And my dad was still overseas when his father died too.
well, he wanted to come home from England. That was part of the reason for his sudden decision to leave England and come home so he could attend to some of the family matters back here. So
Yes, well, I know, and not the least of which was Bill's father's agony when he lost his first wife and
Right.
baby.
Your family, I heard my father say many times, was just inordinately helpful to him. And your dad interrupted his career, really, to come back and look after his little
Yeah,
brother.
yeah.
Vervian was ill, and Dad wanted to come back and help out.
That's right.
That's
Vervian was my father's first wife.
Right.
Yeah. And she died having just given birth to a premature infant. And the premature infant was taken care of by a friend of Uncle Ben's who was nursing her own child.
Oh,
And so she was a wet nurse for Vervian's child, but the child also did not survive.
that's right. I remember that.
I don't know how long it lived, but it was a boy.
What was his name, do you remember, Bill?
Vernon,
Vernon.
Yes, that's right.
he had meningitis.
Uh-huh.
Well, this is absolutely fascinating
Now,
stuff.
I'll have some copies made and send them around,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you for that.
Sure.
That's terrific.
That is an interesting document. You know, the last time I was